Okay. So I think accountability is sort of the holy grail of improving ourselves. Because think about it. How many times have you read a book or said, oh, I need to do something differently? This is not working for me. I think we've all kind of done that. And we all come to these, our groups or our work that we're doing or our relationships, and we say, I really need to change and I really want to work on this. And you start to make some goals and you work on some of the things like we're talking about. And all of a sudden you're back in your day job and it's sort of like the path of least resistance, and you go back to that place where you always were and you felt more comfortable. There's actually a psychological principle that I learned about early on in my studies. It's called the incorporation effect. And the incorporation effect says when you make change, there's always going to be a reverting back to the norm because you're more comfortable there. And what you have to do is you have to get beyond that place to get to the next level. So think about that as any skill. Like if you're playing a sport, you're going to want to continue doing it the same way you're always doing it. But unless you're in alignment with correct principles, you're not really going to change. You're always going to be sort of just refining the mistakes you already made. So,
yes.
So this idea of sort of accountability says, I am going to hold myself accountable to the changes that I'm describing. Now, one of the best ways to do that is to be public about the changes that you're trying to make. Like, for example, if you're an executive, talking with your team about what you think is challenging in terms of your own leadership, and actually going public with that and saying, here specifically are the things that I'm trying to do differently. I want to be a better listener. I want to be more open to other people's points of views. Now, I started working on accountability with my clients, and when they were going public with their teams, with what they were working on, and then they got feedback a month later about what was working and what was not working. And we asked the question, what could I do to get to, like if I were on a scale of 1 to 5, if I were a 3, what could I do to get to be a 4? What I found was that after about 3 or 4 months, every time they improved, like 100%.
Wow.
And the critical ingredient was holding themselves accountable to a group of people and getting feedback from them and going public with what they were doing. So for example, in a men's group, it could be with your wife, like you could say, okay, here's what I'm going to work on, but it has to be a very specific thing. Like it can't be, I'm going to try to be better about coming home, being more balanced in my life. That's too general. It has to be very specific. What Harville Hendricks, the great relationship therapist, called the microscopic truth of your life. Like what's a microscopic thing that you want to try to do differently? And Sean, I think that's really where change happens. It happens at the most very small finite level. And when we start to sort of get that repetition and start to see that improvement and hold ourselves accountable, then all of a sudden things start to change.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm so happy you brought up accountability because it's a huge theme in men's group. We have accountability specific groups in our topic specific groups. Guys often volunteer to keep each other accountable, and we see those are the guys that end up having the most success. And it makes sense because, like James Clear Atomic Habits, you see the results of people over time, but really they're just making 1% changes every day. And those either stack up for the better or they stack up against you, So I agree, just little changes.
And one of the best ways to, to hold ourselves accountable is to try to change small things, go public with it, like the support you're talking about in your men's groups.
Yeah.
And then get feedback.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And I think that I call that the holy grail of change.